Welcome back to our third Lunch and Learn of the month. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Sammy Gleason, and I'm the Federal of Kansas Marketing Coordinator with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. We are excited you have joined the Specialty Crop Lunch and Learn. This program is made possible by the U.S. Department of Agriculture Specialty Crop Block Grant. The Specialty Crop Block Grant makes funds available to state departments of agriculture solely to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops. According to the USDA, specialty crops are defined as fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticulture, and nursery crops, including floriculture. Also, the Kansas Department of Agriculture is currently accepting applications for the 2022 Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. Complete applications must be sent to the Kansas Department of Agriculture no later than 5 p.m. Central Time on March 31st. Please find the link in the chat. My coworker will drop that link if you're interested. Now I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Janelle Dobbins, to review some housekeeping items with you. Janelle?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Sammy said, I'm Janelle Dobbins, and here we are on the 15th of March. Beware of the Ides of March. So we always have a couple of housekeeping items. I know a lot of you have done Zoom for quite a while, but in case you just need a refresher, here's a couple of things. One, during the presentation portion, just please make sure to keep your microphone muted so everyone can hear okay. Also, if you have questions during the presentation, just drop them in the chat because we will have people from the Kansas Department of Agriculture reviewing those and making sure all those questions get asked at the end so you can get answers to those. Also, this webinar is being recorded. The recordings will be available for a limited amount of time due to the contractual obligations with our speakers. The videos include copyrighted content and are made available for viewing by the Kansas Department of Agriculture only. So please do not record, sell, distribute, or share this video on social media sites. But recordings will be available on our site by 5 p.m. this Friday. We will also be dropping a link in the chat to register for next week's webinar on designing, building, and implementing tools and systems on your own farm, and to also view recordings from the past 2 weeks. Now I'll turn it back over to Sammy to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, Janelle. Today we have Michael Kilpatric. Michael is the owner of Growing Farmers, is a farmer, educator, and inventor who lives in Ohio. He is the host of the top-rated Thriving Farmer podcast, as well as Thriving Farmer Summit series, which has been viewed by over 250,000 farmers. He's managed large farms and businesses, consulted for industrial experts around the world, and spoken at dozens of conferences. Michael believes that anyone can build a profitable farm by following the simple business and management skills that he teaches in Small Farm University. We are so excited to have Michael here with us today. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. All right, looking forward to sharing you. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my slides ready to go. And we will just take it away. You hit, whoops, I hit slideshow. We go. So let me guys know if you see that title slide right there. It should say diversifying and scaling your operation. If you see that, give me a thumbs up or just something in the chat. All right, cool. We're good to go then. All right, so let's dive in. A little bit more about me. Again, a farmer and educator, farm coach, podcaster, speaker. I'm owner and founder of my first farm, which was Kilpatric Family Farm from 2003 to 2015. And then in 2020, year of the craziness, we decided to start another farm. So we started the farm on Central. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, I do speaking for a wide range of different educational programs across the US and internationally. And that's kind of a little bit, about me in a nutshell. So my background is I started getting into farming and gardening when I was really young. This is the first year my dad and my brothers and I did a garden. And, when we planted the carrots after 4 days, they didn't come up. So we tilled them under thinking that nothing was going to come up because we didn't know that carrots took a week to germinate. So, we made every mistake in the book as we kind of started growing different things. And as you can see there, those carrots were not watered well. So they were fat at the top and, they had lots of little legs. So again, it was a lot of learning from the very, very start. So fast forward a couple of years, this was our farm in upstate New York. We did a wide range of winter greenhouse crops. We also did, field crops as well. You can see here, this is chisel plowing for some winter crops or maybe root crops or even, some summer onions or something like that. And we did about 25 to 30 acres of cover crops, a little bit larger scale. And we even grew some of our own straw and that sort of thing for some of our straw production for the cropping as well. This is fall crops here. This was, I think, broccoli or cauliflower. You can see them right there. And we would go down and in the fall seed between the rows, usually like a rye mixture. So that was kind of our living cover crop between the beds there of the crops. Here's harvesting. So for us, efficiency is everything. And that's why we focus very heavily when we do our education and working with our crews is, how you actually set yourself up in the field can be the difference between your arugula costing $4 a pound or even $6 to $7 a pound. And that difference can be just in how efficient you are with your harvest systems. So we also were at scale too. So we were doing a couple 100-member CSA, some bulk bins, moving crops around that way, be more efficient. And we love interacting with the public. For me, farming is about sharing the love of the land with those in our communities. And so we always on our farm in New York, and actually here now even a lot more extensively, are bringing people on to our farms. So here's for that farm in New York, the Kilpatric family farm, what our main sales was. We did about 90% of our sales through farmers markets. You can see here what a farmers market would look like. Now, granted, this was after the business had been in operation for 6 or 7 years. So again, we started out with a little card table and a few dozen eggs and 3 heads of lettuce. That was one of our first markets. But as we grew, as we learned more from those in our community, as we were able to invest more in the business, this is kind of where we kind of moved the business to. Now, what I do want to note about, because obviously what we're talking about today is diversification. Our farm was very deep in a very narrow niche. So we were very deep in vegetables. We did a little bit of eggs, a little bit of chickens, but where people knew us and what our main profit was very deep in vegetables and raw vegetables, as you can see. I mean, people are buying salad mixes, radishes from us. They're not buying, now we do things like zoodles, we do things like pickles. Those are obviously value added. At that farm, we were very, very narrow and just did the raw vegetable products. So here's another picture from that. So at that business, we were running after 8 years, did about 500,000 in revenue, and that was split between our CSA, which picked up at the farmers market, as well as our farmers market sales. And so again, that was 80 to 90%, and restaurant and wholesale was between 10 and 20%, depending on the year. All right, so a little bit about our online company, because in 2015, we shut down that farm and we started growing farmers. And the reason we did is we realized that so many farmers needed the training that we were able to get over our years of farming. And that's what made the difference is we had, I was young. I didn't have some of the advantages others have. We started with very little money when we started the farm. But what made the difference was being able to learn from some of the best in the industry. And so what we created Growing Farmers to do was to share that knowledge with others. So what do? We do very, very little now on-farm consulting. We do that. This is a project I'm on in the Asheville area. It's actually I was on a call this morning for this. It's going to be a very cool project when it's done. But yeah, I do this very rarely now. The biggest thing our business does is the Thriving Farmer Summit series. So we bring in top-rated speakers from around the world and we deep dive on a topic. 2019 was the Mushroom Summit. 2022 was our Thriving Farmer Flower Summit, which we had a great attendance. And we actually have some awesome things happening for this year's end of this year's summit, which will actually be in December of 2022. So yeah, we're super excited about that. We're already starting to line up speakers, all of that, but it's going to be an awesome summit experience. And then we also do the Thriving Farmer podcast, which has a lot of great guests as well as a few other programs. Let's dive a little bit though into our current farm, because I think it's really relevant for where we are headed today. We started a 8-acre farm. You can see here, this is the raw land we started with. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but we started the train tracks right here, go right along the back here, and then we kind of come up around here. So this is the raw land. This was a picture right before we bought it in summer of 2020. This is what it looked like last summer. So a year later, you can see large high tunnels, some significant investment in coolers and cold storage, hoop houses, a lot of field crops. And, this has even been carved up even more over the last couple of weeks. We now have a last couple of months. This is a large section of strawberries here. We're putting in blueberries back here in this corner. So yeah, keep adding, keep changing, keep making advancements with this. Now, what we do right now is we have a couple different sales avenues. We do some wholesale, we do CSA, we also do an on-farm bus. We don't have an on-farm store. We had to make sure we complied with the local regulations, but what we did find a loophole for us to actually put a bus on the property, and we actually have that as our store. So if you go to our Facebook page, you can see some videos of how that all works. But this is the thing for us, is we want to basically bring people onto the farm. They can purchase the product, but they can also see where a lot of it is being grown. So we have a great crew. And we do online sales as well as in-person sales. So this is our farm bus here. This is actually on a Saturday, so you can see we're set up outside as well. During the week, everything is inside the bus, so we can keep everything air conditioned and nice. But yeah, we've got coolers in there. I'm not sure if I got another picture. This is one of the pictures of the inside. We created shelves out of old bowling alley, and just got different displays in there. And the biggest thing, our biggest sellers are going to be your salad mix. That's #1 seller for us. Our tomatoes and some of the other summer crops are going to also be super important for folks. So here's where we're headed today. We're going to talk a little bit about why diversification, why we decided to go down that route. We're going to talk about how to diversify, who will buy it, and then we'll get into some sales overview, products, talk about a little about lost leaders, and then talk about scaling for success at the end. So, if you find an idea and it works, what does it take to go to that next level? Then we'll do some questions and takeaways at the end. So if you have questions, make sure you do save those and make sure you submit those at the end, because I love being able to, help you with your specific context. All right. So what is diversification? I think that's the first thing is, it's more to me about adding additional enterprises or changing up your business model to give more financial stability and quality of life. All right. So, with doing like large scale production of one specific crop, they can give you incredible periods of busyness and then very of no busyness at all. And so that maybe work for some businesses, but if you're trying to keep great people, you frequently want to keep, the same amount of staff throughout the entire season, or at least a core amount of staff. And so that's why our farm has done significant diversification, so that we keep our good people through year round. All right, so here we go. Let's give a little bit of example. Maybe you're you do cattle, and you have a 5,000 acres of rangeland. Well, and you just sell them wholesale to the stockyard. If you basically diversified using the same cattle, but started selling beef by the half and the quarter to the local folks, that would be one example of diversification. Another one, maybe if you're doing a bean and corn farm, you'd add trickle for seed to your grain rotation. I know some folks that have done that. And then maybe if you're selling wholesale with crops, maybe you're selling a portion of your crop at a farmer's market. And then maybe you diversify into selling that same crop, maybe value added in some aspect. Another one I've seen work really well is growing non-GMO soy and selling it to Japan. For some reason, there's a great demand over there. And I know several farmers which actually are heavily invested in basically filling 40-foot containers to the top with soybeans and shipping them across the sea. All right, so there's type of diversification too, because again, what we talked about was a couple different ways you can go about it. There's enterprise. So on our farm, we have vegetables. We also grow flowers. We also do elderberry sticks. And we also do some value added as well. So that's the kind of different enterprises we've got. We also do varietal. So maybe you're growing 2 types of tomatoes. Maybe you're going to diversify and grow 4 or 5 or another 6 other types of tomatoes. And that's another way that you can diversify. And then the other thing would be market channel. So this is where maybe you're selling at a farmer's market, and now you're going to start selling to a home delivery service, or you're going to sell to a wholesaler. So that's another type of diversification. So why would you want to diversify? Well, the redundancy. So let's say you're a peach grower, and let's say your peaches froze. Well, are you out of business? Or if you had another crop that was able to move your team into managing, maybe that's going to hold you through until the next year. Challenges with commodity market. So if you're selling beans and corn right now, getting fertilizer is a huge problem. And so if you're trying to get the urea and that sort of thing, the costs have gone through the roof. And you really got to look at your numbers and see if you can actually afford to plant because we really don't know in 6 months and 12 months what the price of corn and soybeans are going to be, and if it makes sense to actually put that crop in. And then what are the customer needs too? So, maybe you're at a farmer's market, you're selling tomatoes, and they keep saying, I wish I could get tomato sauce, or I wish I could get tomatoes in the winter. So how could you diversify to give them, the customers, what their needs are? And then there's a lot of other reasons where you might want to diversify. Maybe it's, personal commitments, or maybe you teach school and you need to, have a little side hobby. There's a lot of different reasons why you might want to think about diversification. So, if you want, share in the chat if there's things, ideas that you have for diversification, the things that you may think about as you're trying to look at your existing enterprise structure. All right. So another big reason, let's talk about it. It's all about the money. All right. Only 5% of farmers make it 5 years or more. All right. That's sobering. And you've got a couple of articles out here. Civil Eats had an article about New York farmers struggling to sell onions. In New York, there's 2 main onion regions. There's the black dirt country down in Orange County, and there's actually some more black dirt in more of the Finger Lakes, beyond the Finger Lakes around Syracuse. Again, great onions. They do a fabulous job there producing fair amount of US onions, but the problem is Canada was sending in cheaper onions, and basically their New York farmers were sitting there and rotting. So again, we don't want that. And so, is it something where maybe you diversify and add another crop that doesn't have as much competition? And then we're also looking at massive increases in bankruptcy in farmers too. So again, it comes back to farmers not being able to make what they want to on existing crops. And so looking at other enterprises, other crops to diversify into, to be able to make the money to keep the farm afloat. So let's talk about a few problems with farm businesses. One, seasonal. A lot of the US has 4 distinct seasons, maybe 3, maybe don't have that quite winter as much as we do. And while the further you north, you get more of that. Weather, huge weather extremes. I mean, you can have, last year, we actually here in Ohio did have a tornado. It's touched down just a few miles from us. Low margins. So if you're selling a commodity crop, even if you're at a farmer's market, there might be a lot of competition. Maybe there's 3 people selling lettuce, and when everyone has lettuce, your sales just go down. So again, if you can figure out how to avoid that, you're going to be ahead. Regulation. So I know a lot of farmers struggle with regulation. Can I take a head of lettuce and chop it up and put it in salad mix? Well, some regulators would say, no, that's a processed food. And you say, no, it's a salad mix. So again, there's some things there that we need to kind of get straightened out probably to make sure farmers can feel safe selling their products. And then complicated structure too. So, what is your business structure? What's involved? Who's involved? How does that all work? That's another thing we got to look at. So there's obviously other challenges that you may be facing with your specific farm business. And so part of that solution can be, hey, maybe diversify what we're doing. So how to diversify, what the biggest thing is to first evaluate the existing strengths and resources that you and your farm have, okay? So let's say that, you have a 1,000-acre grain farm and you have a nice 25-acre southern facing field that always dries out earlier and warms up earlier. Well, that might be a great place to put a super early crop of melons. If it's, maybe sandy soil, that might be a diversification you can make on your grain farm. You can make a lot more per acre on melons than, let's say, you would on corn. Determine what the market needs. So again, if you're at a farmer's market come July and people say, well, I wish we could have corn this time of year, or I wish someone would be doing okra, maybe that's a great time to think about what things could we do to diversify. Conduct enterprise budget analysis. So that's another one to think about, looking at the crops. When we started looking at our crops, and we'll get to hear an example in a minute, we started looking at our margins on things. We're like, well, really where our margin is and what makes sense for us as a business is the more value added that we can do as a farm. And then test the waters. So again, if brought that back to the okra, throw in a dozen plants and see if people are interested before you scale up. Try an acre of melons instead of putting the whole 25-acre field into production. Another thing to really dive into here, and this is something that we really focus on hard when we work with farmers, is what type of farm do you want? So the farm we have here, we have, let's see, today I've got 3 people working. So, we've got pretty good payroll, actually 4 people working, so pretty good payroll. We've got 4 different enterprises going on. Once we're hitting plant season here, another week, we're going to start seeding in the greenhouse, benches and benches of bedding plants. And it's crazy in town. There's a lot going on. Before I stepped into this meeting, I was like to the crew, hey, I'm going to a meeting for an hour and 15. Do you need anything? They had a few questions. Now they're going to keep working on their thing. So you really have to think about that. Some farmers, they want to have a very busy season for a couple of weeks, and it's a part-time job for them. They do their regular full-time job, but they love being with the land. And so they just want to have that small side hustle, which again, it's fabulous. It's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I encourage a lot of people who aren't ready to be full-time, start part-time. You can totally do that. There's so many enterprises lend themselves very easily to that. But really start to think through of what do you want out of a farm? What does the ideal life look like for you? Another thing to think about too is the chicken or the egg. Are you going to build it and then find the customers? Field of Dreams, okay? He built it and people just came from all over. Or are you going to find the customers, build what they want, where they want it? For us here in the farm on Central, we had a location. We knew it was a great location with the traffic coming by. And so we then just went into figuring out what the customer wants. And last year, we had over 200 product variations in our basically CRM or our product management / sales system because we were constantly trying new things. And we dumped maybe 100 of those. And this year, we're going to stick with, the core 100. And again, when I made variations, it's tomatoes, and they could be sold 4 or 5 different ways: by the pound, by the pint, by the cherry tomatoes. So again, it's not 100 different specific crops, but we'll be adding another 25 or 30 to try this year. So we're doing that way instead of just building something very specific and figuring out the customers want it at the end. And then what will your farm support too? So if you're in the middle of Kansas, super dry ground, it's probably not best to try to grow 25 acres of willows. Willows really want moisture. They need some water. You're probably gonna be a lot more suited for, ranging cattle out there, because that's more what your property in the context of your operation would be. And then also thinking about, what does the market need? Okay. What are people at the farmers market asking for? What does your local farmers market not have? So maybe people aren't asking for it, but there's like no June tomatoes. Now, what it would be is, if there was no June tomatoes, I wouldn't initially just start growing tons of tomatoes. I would ask the vendors why they didn't have them. And they're like, well, this is the reason why. And it might be a very good reason. You may not want to do that, but that's always something to think about. And then, why does the market need that? Okay, so think about that. And what resources do you already have? So maybe you have a 4-row corn planter, and it'd be very easy to add in a couple acres of sweet corn to your field corn. Or you've got empty hayloft, and you could turn it into a flower drying area or something like that. So again, what resources do you already have that could be used to add additional enterprises and additional diversification to your farm? So again, early field that always droughts in the summer, again, an early planting of something would be great there. Heavy field that's always wet late in the spring, that might be great for, planting of elderberries or a later crop that needs that moisture in the ground. And then that specialized equipment too. So again, you only want to take advantage of what you might already have in the barn, and compared to having to go out and buy a brand new whole set of ideas. And then, do you have access to traffic or an on-farm building? So we frequently find we see great success with on-farm markets if they are on a major route. So people are going to drive by them, be able to easily access them. Where we find more challenging, and again, we can build traffic to them, but it's a little bit harder, is when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So local farm here, they had a retail farm market on a very busy road right in the middle of Dayton metro area, which was about as 1 million people plus or minus in the Dayton metro. And they decided they were getting a little fed up with that. So they kept that store, but they built another 25 minutes away, which is much more remote, much more in the country. And that's their fall fest aspect. And they've got corn maze, and they've got a huge farm market, and they do parties and all that sort of thing. But they're leveraging the traffic from the in-town store to push people out to the out farm, to the farm, kind of the fall fest area. So again, I think their long-term vision, they haven't expressly said this, but they've kind of indicated this, is eventually they just want to close the one in town and just, retire. And that fall fest farm is going to be their basically fall retirement thing. They're going to be busy for 10, 12 weeks. And they're done for the year. And then the rest of the 9 months, they're going to be on vacation or growing the pumpkins and that thing for that. So again, all kind of about to, what's your context and what resources do you have that you can capitalize on. Let's talk through two perennial crops. So again, maybe we talked earlier, maybe you just want to have a very short window. So this is a farm friend of mine up in Ontario. They do actually 80 acres of sticks. So they do pussy willows and redbud and hydrangea and dogwood. So they do a massive operation of that, but it's very, very seasonal. I mean, they're picking these crops for very specific time periods, and the rest of this time, he shares a lot of pictures of them fishing and hanging out at their cabin. So again, really depends on kind of what you're doing, but this is incredible intensity for a short period of time. So again, perennial crops, woody ornamentals, perennial fruits like raspberries, blueberries, that sort of thing. Asparagus are great crops. Again, asparagus is more of an 8-week season. You're just harvesting that and then you're done with it. These perennial crops too, they can handle slopes if you can be on sod, or even if they just have good root systems. And then the aspect here is best to own this type of cropping system unless you have a long-term lease procured. So we would not want to put like a crop like this. This is I think a willow crop of some sort, not sure what exactly type of willow, but this is like a 4-year before it really gets established. So again, if you only have a 3-year lease, you're kind of in trouble if you were to plant on that. So that's just one little thing to think about there. So we talked earlier about testing the waters. All right, so how do you find out what people want? I like to just throw it on social media and say, so this morning on our farm, we're adding some you pick fruit. And so we've said, well, we could do blackberries, we could do raspberries, probably really only want to do one of them this year just to get started. What's that going to look like? So I just put a picture on social media of raspberries and blackberries and said, hey, we're thinking of adding this. What do you want? Well, 70 comments later, I do not think we have a clear winner. There's still like completely the jury's out. Like every other person is saying blueberry, raspberries and blackberries. Some people say both. I'm kind of getting a little bit of the inkling that people want raspberries a little bit more. The thing about raspberries is they're a lot less weather hardy than blackberries. Blackberries will take rain a little bit better. And fall raspberries are typically more in the spotted wing Distropolis period. So there's some caveats there, but we're going to let the customers decide ultimately, and then go back to our cultural aspects and see what makes sense. Both of those, we can very easily sell any excess berries we have into a jam or into a pie or something like that. So again, berries are typically always pretty good sales outlets, but it's always something to think about is putting that social media out there and just asking folks. And it doesn't have to be, super complicated. Maybe you're thinking of adding, let's say, custom equipment aspects on your farm. So let's say you have a newer tractor, some good equipment, and you're like, well, maybe some of my other farmer friends or even local homeowners might want a value-added service of doing some things for them. Like in the spring, we offer a rototilling service. People love it. And then we give them like a little bit of a discount if they buy their transplants from us. So that actually worked really, really well for us to be able to, get more people buying our transplant program because we're offering this other service. So again, throw it out there on Facebook. Are you interested? And DM me for more information. And that's the thing. If it doesn't work out, you can just say, you don't have to launch it, but here you go and find out what people want before you invest all the time and effort and money. Plan a test patch and see the interest too. So again, last year, people kept saying to us, oh my gosh, we want half runner beans. We have to have our half runner beans. And so we grew a few rows, and then we quickly realized that people wanted them picked and they wanted them cheap. They wanted them cheaper than we could produce, even at just charging for the picking. I mean, so we basically, they've been cut from our program, but thankfully we didn't put in 1/8 of an acre like we had thought about doing because like everyone asked for them. Really, it was the same 6 people very vocal asking week after week after week. So also talk to your farmers market managers and those around you as well. Grocery store department heads, all that kind of thing. They're going to be able to give you what's available and what's not. We sat down with our local grocery store and she's like, what do you have and what are you looking for? And she's giving me like, well, this product's not covered and this product's not covered. So those are the ones that we focus ours on after we can figure out kind of what their sales volume is. All right, and then also talk to folks already doing the enterprise. So let's say you're thinking about blackberries. Well, to me, the first step I would be is find, a couple blackberry growers or talk to the companies that are selling blackberries because frequently their salespeople are very knowledgeable. But you can say, hey, I'm thinking of doing blackberries. What variety should I put in? What's the typical yield? What are the people making per acre on them? And, they can give you some advice, some data. I typically find if I'm completely going to a brand new enterprise, I'll even pay for some consulting. Like when we started our elderberry enterprise, we definitely paid a guy to get us started because I had no idea how to do the crop. There was a great grower 30 minutes from us, and we worked out a deal. I was able to pick his brain for everything that he was doing around that. And that was hugely helpful in making sure we planted correctly and set up the operation correctly so we're going to be successful with them. All right, so this is another farm here which started doing sriracha. So they were doing wholesale veg. They added a little side enterprise. They mixed up a couple 55-gallon drums, and now they literally do acres and acres and acres of hot peppers, and they sell a whole line of srirachas and hot sauces and salsas and all those sorts of things, as well as doing some heirloom and Italian specialty vegetables. That's what their farm is now set up as. So again, very interesting just to kind of see how different people diversify. But again, it's typically slow and they kind of ramp it up. All right, so testing the waters. What would be some possible diversification for you and your farm? So if you have ideas, thinking about based on this last couple minutes of talk here, go ahead and just share that in the chat. And just would love to see what you guys got your ideas of what diversification you might be interested in on your farm and what makes sense. All right, we'll keep going through. Another thing you really want to do here with diversification is you want to do an enterprise budget, okay? We'll dive into that here in a minute. But what that is the numbers around a specific part of your farm business, okay? So let's say you're doing custom hire work. You want to know what that costs you. How much does it cost to run the tractor? How much does it cost for the operator? How much time on the road are you spending? Let's say you want to do alfalfa hay. You want to add that to your corn and bean farm. Okay, what's the equipment going to cost? What's the projected lifespan of that? What's the ROI that you're going to get per hour? And then what you really want to do is run those numbers. Don't go with your gut. Your gut can lie to you a lot of the time. It has to me, definitely. We really want to come back to and see what do the actual numbers say to us and our farm. So parts of enterprise budget, equipment cost share. Okay, so let's say you're putting in that 25 acre of melons. All right, you need your tractor for X number of hours. How much is that going to cost you? Your supplies. Okay, so do you need plastic and drip tape, all of that? Do you need fertilizer? How many pounds of fertilizer do you need? And can you store that? Can you get that fertilizer that you need? And then production labor too. So laying of the plastic, any spraying, any weeding, any fungicides that need to be applied, all of that are different things that are going to go into that production labor. And then your fulfillment labor and your fixed costs. Okay, so fulfillment labor is, harvest to getting it out the door to the customer. That's how we labor that. We're kind of set that apart. And then you got your fixed costs too. So fixed costs are going to be overhead. So the cost of the land, let's say you're renting the land, the cost of, let's see what else you got for fixed, electricity, taxes, all those fun things that come in envelopes from the mail typically. All right, so a lot of ways to do an enterprise budget. Here's a super simple one that we put together here. Whoops, there you go. So you can see here, this is for, I think, growing tomatoes. We put a little thing together for growing tomatoes. Again, you've got your compost, your cost of your transplants, your field prep, your transplanting labor, your crop care, which is staking and trellising and irrigation, harvesting, packing, boxes, that sort of thing. So again, all those things you want to think about. Again, you might not have that information up front, but if you start small, you can get that information from starting small and then scale that up and think about as you add pieces of equipment, how that will start to pay for itself. So not cost of goods sold for typically that's going to go in there somewhere, but it's not just that. So let's say you have containers for your tomatoes that you're going to sell, that would go under COGS and that would be a part of that, of this, but that's not the complete aspect of it. And there's a lot of ways to look at it. A lot of different people have different versions of their enterprise budget. This is just a quick version that we put together that we've used. It's a kind of our quick and dirty enterprise budget. And what it is, though, is it's essential to see our particular product line is contributing to the bottom line. So I know some farmers who said, well, my farm is really profitable. I grow 40 crops and that's great. I'm like, well, that's cool. But what if 5 of your crops were wildly profitable and 35 of your crops are just barely profitable? And you could cut some of those crops and focus just on the wildly profitable crops. That's why we really like to do enterprise budgets. All right, let's give a little case in point for us. So we grew cucumbers, and we grew way too many cucumbers. And they were kind of ugly too. We had some cucumber beetles problems. And so what we found was customers weren't super happy about that. And what we found is that, my wife, we had this old recipe from a previous worker in New York. And anyway, we've for quick pickles, again, it's vinegar, some salt, some dill, garlic. You put a lot of garlic in there. And so we bottled some up and they took right off. I mean, we sold out that first week and we've sold hundreds and hundreds of jars of these pickles. And for 1 week during the summer, which again, during the summer, we're super busy, 10% of our sales were pickles alone. It blew my mind of just how many people were buying pickles from us. So we said, well, okay, it's cool that we did some pickles, but we have to make sure it actually makes money. All right. So what we did is we did an enterprise budget here. We did some deep diving into this. All right. So you want to look at the raw materials. You got vinegar, cucumbers, garlic, dill, and some salt. You've got your packaging, your jars, your lid, your label, your shipping. And this can go down. We were buying at small amounts. So again, this is a little on the expensive side. You got your labor, your processing, and then, overhead. So if you have a kitchen, you're renting a private kitchen, a 20-seat kitchen, you'd have that. You could have insurance, you have kitchen tools, all of that other things is something you want to add into this. So, kind of when you bring that down to this, kind of for us, we were looking at about a 33% margin. We got raw materials, our packaging, our labor. And our labor was really expensive, and I really feel like that could come down substantially. And we will be working on that, as well as our packaging costs can come down substantially. But yeah, it's just, this is the kind of things that are going to give you, are you making money on that? And the goal for us is that your goal should be that you have a 40% profit margin on a retail sales and a 20% on wholesale items. Okay. That's kind of the rule of thumb we use. Obviously, we'd love to have higher, and sometimes we'll go lower if it's a loss leader for us, but that's typically where we're trying to go with this. So let's talk about some farm products too, because there's a lot of diversification out there, and I want to kind of stimulate some juices here, thinking in your mind about what we can add. Value added, there's a lot that can be done there. There's horticulture, medicinal products with herbs, bees, all of those right there. If you go to this bit.ly right here, we actually have an enterprise cheat sheet to help you figure out the enterprises you're interested that might fit your expectations. So that kind of gives the different ones and what the different investments that are needed to make those work. All right, so let's start a little bit of example here. We want to kind of give you an idea of like a possible idea of what you could go for. So, this is Bobby. She farms with her parents on a 1,000-acre crop farm, wants to try out a new enterprise. And she wants to try out some popcorn because doing field crops, they already have the equipment for it. It's going to be relatively easy for them to scale with that. Again, thinking about this through, what is the gross profit on 3 acres of corn? Compare that to what's the potential on switching that out to adding that into popcorn. So that's definitely the number she wants to look at. What are some of her costs associated with this? Popcorn is going to average about 3,000 pounds per acre of yield. So you got to definitely think through that. And then it's up to $4 a pound at what you see if you're selling just popcorn. Now, if you decide to pop that, coat it with some butter and corn syrup, now it's worth far more than that as, let's say, like a candy corn or a caramel corn. So definitely, kettle corn sells up to $28 a pound. So again, got to think through how far you want to go with this and the kind of investment you want to make. So let's talk the sales, products, and marketing side of this too, is that you really need to establish your sales avenues. It's one thing to grow the crop, it's another thing to sell it. So, cost out your sales channel, look at your loss leaders, do you need those? Do you not need those? And then, the average farmer in America makes 17.4 cents for every dollar on a product that you can purchase in a store. All right. We want to see our farmers taking home closer to that 90%, like at a farmer's market, or 100% direct to retail. Obviously, you have marketing costs on that. But again, the more you can take home is going to be better for your bottom line. Let's talk about beef for a second. If you're sending beef to the stockyard, again, this is probably about 6 months old. I didn't run numbers yesterday, but you can go from, $2,000, add about $750 in processing, and now you're ending up with about $4,000 in the meat. And that's obviously if you can find a processor. I know right now that can be very challenging. So that's a difference of $1,250 right there. How long is your food chain? So the shorter your food chain, the more money you're going to make, because every single person along this food chain wants a cut of the product. And they're not necessarily just taking a cut of the value add, they're also taking a cut of the original dollar per se for that individual crop. So let's talk quickly through sales channels here. So obviously our favorite are going to be on-farm, farmers markets, home delivery, and let's say a CSA program or like a box program. You're not so much is going to be your grocery retail store or your restaurants. Again, you can still make good money, but not as good. And then the ones we really struggle with seeing really good potential is institutions and commodities. Those are the ones that farmers typically struggle with the most. Let's also talk a little bit here about who will buy it. Okay, so you think about your buyer's journey. Where are they coming from? What's the steps they're going to take? You want to deep dive into, what are they actually buying from you? Customer's journey is how you move your customer from first meeting you to becoming raving fans and being a valuable customer. Many people just think farmer people are going to show up and buy stuff, but it's a little bit more than that. Okay, so this is kind of a customer journey we put together. Is someone comes to the farmers market, sees a bunch of radishes and buys it. Then they come back and buy some more crops. Then they see that you have email sign up. They sign up, they get on your email list and see you have a farm tour. They then come and see your farm and learn about your CSA program. And they then sign up for that CSA program and now are a lifetime customer, spending their entire vegetable weekly budget with you. So who are you selling to? So who is going to be your end product? Is it a younger mom with kids? Or an older person who's got, a different kind of needs and requirements? Both are going to be very different of what they want and the kind of expectations they're going to have around products. And then who are you selling to? Okay, so you got to think about that ICA of that person we just showed you. So that ideal person is going to be who's going to buy that product from you. What are their values? What are their life goals? What do they believe? Where do they hang out? So if you're trying to sell a CSA, it's probably not going to be at, maybe hanging up at the Symphony is not going to be as good as hanging it up at some place where younger moms are hanging out, like maybe a yoga studio or something like that. So these are all the things you want to think about as you're working through these products. Examples of an ideal client might be that crunchy mom we talked about earlier. She cares about because she has kids. She wants to feed those kids. And then your older clientele might be a retired or almost retired couple. They're late 50s, early 60s. They want to be gone for long periods of time. So they do not want to sign up for a CSA that's going to make them pick up every single week. And then why should people buy from you too? That's another thing to aspect here. Young moms worried about food safety. A dinner party guest wants high quality to kind of impress their guests. And then neighbors just love the convenience of you being right next door to them. So that's all things to think about. All right, let's wrap this up here with a few minutes on scaling. Okay, so that's important because we talked about getting your enterprise, thinking it out. Once you've got the core aspect, it's viable, you've tried it out. Now, how do we scale that? And we'll go back and talk about, Bobby's farm. She's been doing some this popcorn. She's made it work. Now she wants to figure out scaling it. What does that look like? So there's 5 keys. One is going to be your market. Second is your team. Third is your capacity. You've also got infrastructure to worry about, and then your supply chain. And that always is worried about these days. So again, Bobby's popcorn, she's in, a couple farmers markets selling her kettle corn. It's working out great for her. She wants to now scale to about 20 acres, sell online, adding a popping facility, and she wants to go from 1 farmer's market to 6 farmers markets. So to do that, she has to think about the market. Okay, so how big is the market? And where are these other farmers markets that should be working at? If you double or triple your production, are you going to oversaturate your market? Are you going to not have enough people to buy that product, and your profit and your sales are going to go down actually? And then is your product stable or can be sold for extended time? So like a melon has about a 5 to 7 day window for shelf life. Popcorn in the unpopped state is almost a year. So again, think about that if you can produce that over long enough or sell that volume during that very short time. The other thing is the optionality, okay? So cucumbers and the pickles, grass-fed beef, if you thought and you need to do something else with it, you can turn it into beef jerky. Tomatoes, turn them into tomato sauce. And how do you extend that product shelf life? So carrots, we love carrots. You can sell them baby carrots, bunch carrots, topped carrots. You can sell them, store them for the wintertime. We even sell carrots in root bags as seconds. All the seconds we turn into root bags. So again, a lot of different ways you can sell carrots. They store relatively well in your root storage. Again, we talked about melons. Again, there's so many things that melons can be challenging. Again, for the right farmer, they're great, but you have to think about that relationship to your farm, your enterprise, your context. So, this market here, expanding your popcorn business, are there 5 additional markets that they can go to? What are the margins if you need to hire help? Can you sell enough product to pay for your help and to sell the product as well? And then do you have a way to drive traffic to your website for online sales if you want to get into that as well? Where's the team that Bobby's going to need? What labor will it take? Is it skilled or unskilled? Is she going to need, a CFO that's highly skilled, or is it just someone to, pop popcorn, which should be pretty easy to find someone to do that? And then what are your sub managers or middle management going to look like too? How many people do you need in that role as well? Those are typically harder to find and hire. So because you're going to need a production manager, new farmers market help, package shipping, and customer service. And then the management capacity too. So again, does she have what it takes to grow a business? So sometimes you see people that have a shop, and maybe it's a cobbler. They're just the one person behind the counter. They fix shoes. It's a little tiny shop. They're very happy. They make good money for what they're doing, and that's their life. Then you see somebody else in town who has, it's much, much bigger business. Cobbling is only a very small portion of their business. They do all these other things, dry cleaning, blah, 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 blah. And they're going gangbusters, and that's more their speed. So again, think about who you are as a person, your context, what you want, and then the capacity you have to manage the growth as well. Why do some farmers never seem able to do it together and operate smoothly? Other ones just keep scaling and scaling. And then what kind of software management systems will they need to implement as well? All right, so for this, the management capacity, a lot of it comes down to what you're going to stop doing. So for example, on our farm, I'm not allowed to do customer service anymore. All right. So I have a team now, and they handle people asking questions and all of that, because I'm focused on the big picture of getting the crops in the field and purchasing and forming strategic alliances. And then, upgrading e-commerce and sales systems too if they're moving online. And then infrastructure, what new equipment are you going to need to make that work? What opportunity cost will develop as you scale? Do you need any new or used equipment? Storage, processing, sales systems. For their popcorn business, we're going to need to get some new trucks on the road. We're going to have insurance for those, upkeep for them. We're going to need a drying system for the popcorn, maybe even a small silo specifically for that, or a storage bin, new kettles, cooling area, packaging, storage. And then I'm sure there's other things that the specific business would need as well. And then last here is our supply chain. All right. So the first thing is, what supplies and partners will you need to scale? All right. You can need more packaging. Now you're buying sugar in probably by the pallet instead of by the bag. And then are you able to get the 30, 60, or 90-day financing for supplies? Because, on our farm here, I've just in the last couple of weeks been spending a lot of money, $10,000, $15,000 on soil, pots, seeds, supplies, all those things. Like we're bringing in retail bags of soil mix for our store. Again, the markup on them is not great. So again, you have to spend like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on that. And that's going to sit on our lot for about a month before we see that return. So again, think about that and the overall financial picture around that. All right, so for our business here, boxes, bags, shipping tape, flavorings, syrups, sugar, salt, and I'm sure there's other things that this particular business would need. But again, as you're thinking through your business, just write these down, kind of start figuring them in. All right, so there you go, folks. That kind of wraps up the slide portion of the presentation. Unfortunately, I had to go a little faster the end part there, but I'm more than happy to take some questions. First, I would say to you is, thinking of what we just went through in the last probably about 30 to 45 minutes, what are you planning on diversifying? What does that look like for you? And then what are the 3 next steps that you need or you want to take, and that's going to be for you to go to that next level? Is it doing research? Is it buying a piece of equipment? Is it talking to maybe significant other or the key stakeholders in your farm to kind of explore the opportunity of a new enterprise? So there you go.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that very much. I'm going to let you take a quick breath. There was a question in the chat that I want to get to, and then we had some questions that came directly into me. And Bev asked about laws and regulations about selling crops or use for food. So our team put in the chat with it, there's farmers markets guides through K-State Research and Extension, and that's MF 3138. And there's also food processing and food wholesale distribution guidelines through the Department of Agriculture. So even though those links are in the chat, those that will be viewing later, make sure you go back to those resources. So the first question, Michael, we have just about 10 minutes for questions with that. So I want to go to your farm on Central. So you started with those 8 acres and you showed those photos with it. The growth that you had and the plan that you had, what type of business plan did you have? Did you do all of that at one time?
Yeah.
Did you have some grants? Were you able to utilize some grant dollars to expand? What did that look like?
Yeah, so currently we don't have any grants, not that we're not looking at them. We were denied a NRCS tunnel grant last year. We've applied again this year. Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. We did work with USDA, the Farm Service Agency, to get a microloan, and I highly encourage folks to do that. Typically, they want to see a couple of years of experience. So, start on your super micro scale, get some good numbers in there. It's a lot of paperwork. There's like 14 or 16 different documents you need to do. Typically, your local person will be super helpful with that. We actually have a training around that, but that was where a lot of our financing came from. Again, we did have some leftover equipment from our previous business that we had been saving, so we did tap into that a little bit, but it was just a lot of personal finances as well to kind of build out our business here. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, was it all one time? I'm obviously a AAA personality, so I've got more ideas than my team. They shake their head every day at me. So we kind of knew where we wanted to start off with. We knew kind of the enterprises that we knew made money. We knew the enterprises that would make sense for us. Obviously that changed and morphed. So we started out with, we were going to build an actual retail store. And then once we actually found out the local regulation, which is quite stringent, they basically, there's only one set of laws and it's all for Walmarts. So again, we were looking at about $100,000 of investment just to put in a 1-car garage farm store. So we were like, yeah, that ain't going to work. So we found a way to comply by still having some sort of retail location, which isn't as ideal, but it gives us proof of concept. So that's why we went with the bus route. It gives us a lot of proof of concept, and we probably will end up building a farm store next year. So again, that's kind of how we went with that. Some of the other enterprises have morphed. Like last fall, we kind of got into the whole fire cider thing, and we didn't realize how big of a demand there was for that. So this year we're just rapidly ramping that, and that will actually be its own enterprise and own business in probably about 2 to 3 years. But the goal is with that is we'll still grow all the products on the farm for that. So again, it's morphed a little bit. We started out with kind of how we wanted it. They do want some sort of simple business plan, and it doesn't really have to be that detailed, especially with the micro loan. Frequently, it's just more of a cash flow projections and what your expenses are going to be, and they're good to go. But a couple page, one of the big things we do teach is what we call the 1-page business plan. And that frequently is very helpful for folks as they're getting started because it's super simple. And that'd be referring to like a business canvas. 1-page business canvases. If you Google that, they'll pop up.
Got it. Well, great. You mentioned grants, and Andrea asked, with respect to grants, do you hire someone to help you write those grants? Or do you have someone on your team that's responsible for that grant writing? Because we know there's lots of paperwork with it. What's your process with grants?
Yeah, so with the NRCS, that is typically all taken care of by the NRCS agent. They come out here, they evaluate your property, you talk to them what you want, they put all that data together. We're also doing, this is something I highly encourage you to do, is also have them come out and do an energy audit. I know a number of farmers that have gotten irrigation help, they've gotten a new cooling supplies, they've gotten barn insulation even from that energy side, because they're all about efficiency on the farm, and energy efficiency, a huge aspect of that. There are some other grants. Let's say there's, I think you guys are talking about some wholesale grants, actually the specialty crop block grant. That's typically relatively easy for even a farmer to do themselves. Obviously, you can hire someone to do that. we've looked into some of the larger value added grants that are like 100,000 to several hundred thousand. And typically we would hire someone to do that, just the breadth and the diversity of that. But you can do a lot of it yourself. We don't really have a team member that does it on our growing farmers team. We do have Heidi, who's our content manager, and she's done a number for her farm. So I've kind of bounced ideas off of her, like what would and wouldn't work, but she hasn't really written any grants for us. It really comes back to that, the government money aspect. It's always, carrot and a string sometimes. Yes, it's free money, but there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of details that go into that sometime. It's interesting, the NRCS program, we started that with high tunnels. You were not allowed to put heat or any electrical to those tunnels. They could only be freestanding, basically high tunnels with no other attributes or adds. And that's changed completely in just 2 or 3 years. Now you can do, well, it depends on the state. Now you can do all sorts of things with that. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses with all those programs.
Great. I want to circle back to something you talked about at the beginning, middle third of your presentation, where you were evaluating your existing strengths and your resources.
Yeah.
When you did that, did you keep that on the internal team, or did you expand out to some of the external members of those that were repeat customers or your CSAs, et cetera?
Yeah.
How did you really take a deep dive into your strengths?
Yeah. So obviously, we're looking at our soil, we're looking at our location. So that's obviously playing into our strengths. Like we have 12,000 cars a day. That means I can put something on my sign and I can pull in traffic just off of that. Now, very interestingly enough, we did a marketing survey, which again, we marketed to our customers in the last fall. We basically did it for, I think it was a $50 gift certificate or something like that. And people submitted all their information. We found only 25% of our people came from traffic just driving by. A lot of it was Facebook marketing. And then of course, a full third was friends and family referring them. So we're always going out looking at what people are saying, but we're looking at the strengths that we know we have. Our soil is a strength. We have a very sandy loam that dries instantly. I mean, one aspect, it's powder in the summer, but we do know that we can grow different cropping than other farmers can. So we can grow great carrots and we can get on the field super late and off the field super late because it stays nice and dry and it drains really well. So it makes us great for strawberries as well. So we're looking at that. We're going outside too of, the first year during 2020, this is actually a sunflower field. This is our 2019 sunflower field, but 2020 sunflower field, we had people come out for free. We got their email address and then we sent them a little survey and say, what kind of things are you interested on our farm? And they said, I want berries, or I want lettuce, or I want, this type of thing or that type of thing. So surveying those people was really helpful too. And then just going out into our community too. So we tried to attend community functions and just meet different people in the community and say, what's missing, what's needed. And they would give us feedback. And then obviously you don't really know until you start growing it. So, I mean, with the pickles, it was like, make some pickles and put them out there, and people started going crazy and they became this meme almost in our little community. So those are the other things you just kind of have to try, but it came from, knowing that we like the pickles and we have pretty good taste. And so other people might too, before we actually made some jars.
Great. We just have 1 minute left. And I do have one final question for you regarding your budget analysis.
Yeah.
When you first got started, who assisted with that? Did you use your local extension office? Did you just go online and Google it? Did you work with your accountant? I know folks that are on look at things all the time, but if you want to expand, what are some of those other folks that you probably need to bring into the fold?
Yeah, so a good bookkeeper, you don't necessarily need to go to an accountant, but if you got a bookkeeper or your extension agent can be good too, as long as they know that kind of thing. Some extension agents aren't quite as versed in that, but someone that knows, even going to local college, talking to the business department, SCORE, SCORE, type that in, business mentoring, that can be fabulous too. It's retired CEOs that want to give back, and so they'll help other people too. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those numbers too, Googling too for equipment rates. We just Googled for that, or talk to your local extension. They can probably get you regional equipment rates as well for some of that.
Well, great. Great presentation, great questions and answers. With that, Sammy, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. And thanks, Michael. That was great. We really enjoyed your presentation, and those were some great questions as well. If If you guys would like any other resources or are interested in becoming a From the Land of Kansas member, we will drop those links in as well. And there's some food safety resources there as well in our From the Land of Kansas, on our From the Land of Kansas page. An effort to better understand current workforce issues, we would like you to fill out the survey, and we will drop that in the link as well. Kansas farmers and ranchers, agribusiness manufacturers, and producers of agriculture products are asked to complete the survey to help Kansas Department of Agriculture identify the number and types of jobs in the state and in our industry. So please, if you have 15 minutes to just fill out the survey, we really appreciate it. Also, we will see you back here next Tuesday at 12 p.m. as Josh Wolf joins us for his presentation on designing, building, and implementing tools and systems on your own farm. Also, if you have any questions in the meantime, please email us at fromthelandofkansas@ks.gov. And we will see you next week. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.